Hope, Celeste had learned, was not a bright thing. It was stubborn and small, more like an ember cupped in shaking hands while wind tried to tear it out. Pax spoke of loyalty as if it were sacred, yet loyalty bent quickly around power, and truth became whatever an alpha could force others to repeat. By the time she climbed the last switchback toward Duskwalker Keep, belly heavy beneath a borrowed cloak and boots soaked through with sleet, she understood the most dangerous kind of lie was one stamped with official wax and witnessed by men who smiled while they signed. The fortress rose from black stone and old snow, its towers cut against a bruised evening sky. Celeste reached the gate with one gloved hand over the child inside her, and the other clenched around the blood-sealed exile writ that named her traitor. Her knuckles were split from the cold. Her lips had gone numb hours ago. When the guards lowered spears, she did not flinch because she had no strength left for fear that moved quickly. "I am Celeste Windrider," she said, voice ragged. "I ask sanctuary for labor only. Kitchen work, scullery, anything. I ask no audience." The older guard took the writ with 2 fingers as if it might stain him. He broke the outer seal, scanned the declaration, and grimaced at the line branded in red. Seducing enemy blood, corrupting lineage, exiled under moon law. His gaze dropped to her belly and sharpened with suspicion, then uncertainty. "You were mated to Alpha Wulfric Frostborn." "I was claimed by him," she answered. "Those are different things." He did not respond for a long moment. Snow hissed against a torchlight. Then he called for the gate steward, and by the time she crossed into the outer yard, her knees had begun to buckle in little tremors she could not hide. No one offered comfort. No one shoved her back out. For that alone, she nearly wept. Inside the service court, heat and smoke and iron took over the air. The kitchen mistress, a broad-shouldered woman named Marta, looked Celeste up and down in one practical sweep. Saw the cracked hands, saw the wet hem, saw the exhaustion she could no longer mask. "We have no room for trouble," Marta said. "I carry enough of my own. I will keep it quiet." Marta held out her hand for the writ. She read slowly, mouth tightening, then folded the document and tucked it into an oilskin ledger pouch at her belt. "You scrub first. Sleep by the oven if you do not faint. We speak to the steward in daylight." "I can work now." "Of course you can," Marta said, not unkindly. "That is why I am letting you stay." By the first bell of night, Celeste was on her knees at the far drain, scouring soot from stone while voices rolled down from the great hall above. Tonight, 24 noble-born women had come for Luna candidate trials, and the fortress thrummed with polished ambition. Even below stairs, servants passed gossip in hushed bursts: silk gowns, moon jewels, council votes, alliances disguised as romance. Celeste kept her head down and scrubbed harder until her wrists ached. If she remained useful, perhaps no one would ask where the scars at her collar began. "I am still here," she told herself as steam rose around her and her back seized with pain. "I am still breathing. The child is still moving." 1 hour, then the next. Do not ask for tomorrow. Just 1 hour. The words steadied her until memory struck with the smell of singed herbs from the hearth. The same bitter scent that had filled Wulfric's private office 3 nights earlier when everything finally snapped. She had gone there with account ledgers hidden beneath her apron, pages copied by hand in the laundry room, after weeks of watching numbers that did not match grain stores or healer inventories. Sacred funds had vanished in neat increments, and every missing sum reappeared under Wulfric's personal war chest. She had not planned to confront him alone. She had planned to give the pages to Elder Rena at dawn and let official inquiry do what law was meant to do. Wulfric had been waiting in the dark when she entered. "You learned to count," he said, almost amused, as he took the copied pages from her frozen fingers. "Who taught you that, little dove?" She stepped back. Those funds were for winter medicine. Those funds are mine. They belong to the pack. His smile flattened. The pack belongs to me. He tossed the pages into the brazier and watched them catch. When she moved toward the fire, he caught her arm hard enough to bruise. Listen carefully. Tomorrow, the council records a different story. You grew restless. You took an outsider to your bed. You endangered my heir. There is no outsider. There will be on paper. She remembered the exact calm in his tone, the way cruelty sounded most terrifying when it was tidy. Then he leaned close enough that she smelled wine and cedar and said, "If you speak about money again, I file a petition under inheritance law and claim custody the moment the child is born. You will be dismissed as unstable and unfit. A marked female with no pack has no standing." Her throat closed. "You would use our child as punishment. Our child is leverage." When she tried to pull away, he struck her once across the face, open-handed, not wild, almost administrative, as if he were correcting an entry in a ledger. She hit the desk corner and tasted copper. A healer waited just outside the door, summoned not to treat her, but to witness her supposed hysteria. She heard Quill scratch parchment while Wulfric dictated the first lines of her disgrace. By dawn, every corridor carried the same accusation: liar, seducer, oath-breaker. The breaking point came before noon in the inner archive hall, beneath murals of moon vows no one intended to honor. Wulfric stood with two scent keepers and Counselor Brevin, a man who had once praised Celeste's patience when she served at feasts and now would not meet her eyes. On the table lay a blood-charmed necklace, black stone veined with red. Brevin cleared his throat and read from a prepared scroll. In light of moral corruption and risk to bloodline integrity, Celeste Windrider is to be exiled under seal and transferred on request should Alpha Frostborn petition for custody of offspring. Celeste stared at the necklace. "What is that?" "A stabilizing token," Wulfric said smoothly, "to ease your episodes." She knew enough charm work to understand the lie. The stone was keyed to her old bond scar. It could trigger pain on command and make it look like panic, madness, unreliability. He wanted her discredited before any neutral tribunal could hear her speak. "I will not wear it." "You will, or you leave in chains." She looked at Brevin. "You know this is false." He stared at the scroll. "The witnesses are already signed." Wulfric lifted the necklace and stepped toward her. "Last chance. Kneel, accept correction, and I might permit supervised visits after birth." In that instant, something colder than terror settled through her. Not surrender. Clarity. If she stayed, he would script every breath she took until even her child's name belonged to him. If she ran, she might die on the mountain, but at least the choice would be hers. She threw a tray of inkstones into the brazier beside him. Coals burst upward in a scatter of sparks. While the guards recoiled, she grabbed the exile writ from Brevin's hand, slammed her shoulder into the side door, and ran. Shouts split the corridor. Boots thundered behind her. She cut through the tannery yard, ducked under a drying rack, and vaulted a drainage ditch slick with ice. Her lungs burned by the time she reached the lower stables. Old Miri, the stable widow, caught her sleeve for half a heartbeat, eyes wide. "Child, where are you going?" "Away." Miri pressed a wrapped heel of bread into her hand and turned toward the passage as if blocking wind. "Then do not use the main road. Patrols changed this morning." Celeste kissed the old woman's cheek and did not look back. 3 days of climbing followed in fragments of white sky and dark rock. She moved at dawn, hid at noon, walked again in blue twilight when patrol scents thinned. Freezing rain needled her face. Her feet blistered, then numbed. Twice she doubled over with cramps that knotted her spine and made her whisper into the storm, "Stay with me, little heart. Stay with me." On the second night she heard wolves calling from the ridge below and pressed herself into a cleft of stone, palms over her belly, until silence returned. By the fourth evening, Duskwalker banners appeared through mist, silver wolf on midnight field, and she nearly collapsed from the abrupt relief of seeing walls that were not his. Now, kneeling on kitchen stone with soap stinging the cuts on her hands, she forced breath in and out and followed the baby's slow movements as proof she had not made all this suffering for nothing. Above, the Luna trials reached a ceremonial hush. Then, without warning, a roar ripped through the keep. It was not human anger. It was a wolf's refusal, vast and resonant, shaking soot from rafters and rattling hanging pans. Servants froze mid-step. A ladle clanged to the floor. Another roar answered, closer this time, threaded with command so fierce the torches along the kitchen wall guttered inward as if wind had reversed. Marta went pale. "That is the king's wolf." From the upper stair came shouts, then pounding steps descending fast, too heavy for panic and too controlled for chaos. Celeste rose unsteadily with an armful of iron kettles, turned toward the passage and met the scent of winter cedar and storm-lit stone an instant before Jasper Duskwalker appeared at the threshold, fury in every line of his body and something far more dangerous waking in his gaze. Jasper Duskwalker filled the doorway like a storm-given bones. He wore no crown, only a dark coat thrown open over battle leathers, snowmelt still beating on the fur at his shoulders, as if he had stepped in from the mountain itself. The corridor torches should have cast him in amber, but the light around him looked colder, sharpened by the force of his mood and by the wolf pressing close beneath his skin. Behind him, halfway down the stair, 2 council guards had stopped with hands on sword hilts. Farther up, silk and jewels glimmered in a cluster of halted Luna candidates, their painted composure split by unease. Celeste knew power when she saw it. She had lived too long near the cruel version not to recognize the disciplined kind on sight. His gaze cut across the kitchen, taking inventory in one sweep. Staff frozen at tables, Marta squared like a shield near the butcher block, kettles steaming, copper pans swaying from the rafters after the roar. Then his attention landed on Celeste and did not move. The force of it pinned her where she stood more effectively than a hand on her throat ever had. He took one step forward. Air pressure changed. The scent of winter cedar and clean iron thickened until it crowded her lungs. "Who is she?" he asked, voice low and edged, "and why does my wolf scent her beneath half the fortress stone?" No one answered quickly enough. Marta drew breath, but Celeste spoke first because silence had always been dangerous around men with authority. "Celeste Windrider, Your Majesty, new kitchen laborer. I arrived at dusk with writ and seal." Her voice shook once, then steadied by force. "I requested anonymity, not audience." Something unreadable crossed his face at her surname, not recognition exactly, a recalculation. He held out his hand without looking away from her. The writ. Marta crossed the room, ledger pouch clenched in stiff fingers, and placed the folded document in his palm. Jasper broke the wax remnant, read only a handful of lines, and the muscle in his jaw locked. He did not ask for context in front of everyone. He did not offer immediate mercy either. He folded the paper back along its original creases with almost ceremonial precision. "Leave us," he said. The command struck the room like a bell. Servants glanced at Marta. Guards looked to the stair. One jeweled candidate made a startled sound, then stopped when Jasper turned his head a fraction. "I said leave us." Within seconds, the kitchen emptied into side corridors and upper landings, though eyes lingered from shadows and banister gaps. Marta hesitated until Celeste gave the smallest nod she could manage. When the door thudded shut behind the last guard, silence rushed in, loud with hearth crackle and Celeste's uneven breathing. Jasper remained where he stood, still 6 paces away. He was not smiling. He was not soft. Yet he had dismissed witnesses before speaking further, and in Celeste's world that alone felt like a startling form of restraint. "Look at me," he said. She did. She wished she had not. His features were austere, cut from old grief and long command, but his eyes were the most dangerous part of him. Amber at first glance, then deeper, the color of banked fire when wind gets beneath ash. A king trained to hide his instincts had lost that concealment the moment he crossed the threshold. She could see it now, pulsing in tiny shifts of tendon and breath. He lifted the writ. "These charges are severe. They are manufactured. By Wulfric Frostborn." "Yes." His nostrils flared once, testing the room, and she understood with sudden clarity that he could scent fear from every inch of her. Shame followed close behind. Fear had a smell. Submission had a smell. Panic had a smell. She hated all of them. Jasper's voice dropped further. "Are you under active claim law?" "On paper, yes. In truth, he used law as a weapon." She tightened her grip on the kettles until her fingers burned from cold metal. "If you intend to honor his writ, say it now. I will walk back out before dawn and save your court the scandal." The words came out harder than she felt. Inside, she was shaking apart. "Do not beg. Do not cry. Breathe in 4 counts. Hold. Breathe out. Keep your hands steady. If he calls guards, move before they touch you. Protect your belly first. If he says return, refuse on your feet, not your knees. You are not weak because you are afraid. You are afraid because you survived enough to understand the cost. Stay upright. Keep standing. Stay upright." Jasper watched her with a stillness that was almost predatory, then did something she had not expected from any alpha in years. He asked a question instead of issuing a verdict. "Have you eaten?" The shift disoriented her more than anger would have. "Some bread on the road. Broth earlier." That was not the question. She blinked. "Then no." "Not enough." He gave a single nod, as if adding fact to a ledger only he could see. "You will be fed. You will be examined by my healer, with Marta present if you request. No one touches your skin without permission. No one removes you from this keep without my direct order." Her knees nearly gave from sheer exhausted relief, and she hated that too. Relief made people careless. "I did not ask for protection," she whispered. His expression tightened, not with offense but with what looked like old anger turned inward. "You asked for kitchen work while carrying crown-relevant blood and a forged exile seal. That is a protection request whether you named it or not." Before she could answer, a shout rose from the stairwell outside, followed by quick footfalls and the rustle of skirts. One of the Luna candidates pushed the door open a hand's breadth and stopped there, pale and rigid. "Your Majesty," she said, voice brittle, "the council requests you at once. They say the trial cannot proceed while your wolf is in this state." Jasper did not turn around. "Then the trial waits?" The door shut again. He exhaled through his nose, a controlled release that still carried strain. When he looked back at Celeste, his gaze dropped to the kettles in her arms, then to her split knuckles, then to the place where her cloak strained over the curve of her abdomen. He seemed to come to a decision and step aside, giving her a clear path to the prep table. "Put those down," he said. She started forward. The moment she crossed his scent line, the world narrowed to heat. The iron handles in her hands turned scorching, not enough to burn skin but enough to explode through her nerves. A low thrum built in her chest, rising so fast it stole the next breath. Her pulse hammered behind her ears, the kitchen walls tilted. She took another step and felt, with frightening physical certainty, a bond thread snap taut between them, gold and living and mercilessly bright inside a place she had walled shut for months. It yanked once, hard, as if an unseen hand had caught both their hearts and drawn them into alignment. The kettles crashed against stone, Celeste dropped to one knee with a strangled gasp, palm braced on wet flagging, every scarred instinct screaming run while another, older hunger leaned toward him with aching recognition. Across from her, Jasper made a rough sound that was almost a growl, almost a prayer. His shoulders jerked as if he had taken a blow. Amber bled into his irises until molten gold overtook the color completely, the predator surfacing in plain view. Faint rune lines flared along his wrists beneath rolled sleeves, each mark igniting one after another. The nearest torches bent toward them, flame pulled sideways as if the room had tilted around a new center of gravity. No, he said hoarsely to himself, then sharper to the wolf under his ribs. Stand down. It did not stand down. Celeste felt that refusal like a second heartbeat that was not her own. She tried to rise and failed when dizziness punched through her spine. Jasper moved on instinct, stopping himself halfway to her as though he had collided with an invisible boundary. His hands flexed at his sides. Every line of his body broadcast restraint under extreme pressure. "Do not touch me," she said, too quickly, breathless with terror. "I will not," he answered at once, not without consent. The immediate response, the lack of argument, hit her harder than the bond strike. Her throat tightened. She dragged air in, tried again for steadiness, and forced her gaze up to his. Locked eye contact. No escape in it. No mockery either. She had imagined this moment in ugly, defensive fantasies during sleepless climbs through sleet. A dominant male scenting vulnerability and claiming ownership before she could speak. What she found instead was raw shock mirrored by fierce attention, and beneath both, a reverence he looked almost angry to feel. Jasper spoke carefully, each word deliberate as a vow cut into stone. "This was not orchestrated by court, council, or crown. I did not summon you for this." "I know." Her voice cracked. "I can feel that you did not." Another wave rolled through the bond, less violent this time, still overwhelming. Warmth spread from her sternum to her fingertips, and with it came panic memories, colliding images, Wulfric's office, forged scrolls, the necklace, the slap, the running, the cold. Her body prepared for impact that was not coming. The child shifted inside her in a firm, unmistakable kick that made her fold over protectively for one breath before the movement settled. Jasper saw the motion and went very still. Is the baby in distress? No, just startled. She swallowed. Like I am. A fragile, unexpected edge of humor touched his mouth and vanished. That makes three of us. The tension in the room did not break, but it changed shape. Less like a trap, more like standing at the lip of something vast. From outside, muffled voices surged and fell as words spread through corridors faster than fire. By the time the third bell approached midnight, every corridor in Duskwalker Keep would know the King's Wolf had refused 22 noble candidates and gone feral in the kitchens for a woman in servant wool with an exile writ in her name. Celeste knew exactly what that meant politically. She also knew what it meant in the oldest language of her blood, the one no forged document could erase. Her instincts sharpened along her spine. Fear and relief braided until she could not tell where one ended. Jasper lowered himself, slowly, to one knee across from her, so their eyes were level, and no part of him towered over her. He kept his hands open, empty, visible. "Celeste Windrider," he said, voice roughened by awe he was not trying to hide. "Look at me and hear this clearly." She did. "You are not unchosen." The words struck her like a hand offered across a chasm she had spent months pretending she did not see. Celeste stayed on one knee, breath uneven, eyes fixed on his, waiting for the hidden hook that always followed kindness from powerful men. It did not come. Jasper remained where he was, shoulders rigid with effort, as if every instinct in him wanted to close the distance and he had chained those instincts in plain view for her sake. "I need you to stand slowly," he said. "Not for me. For your balance." She nodded once and pushed upright, using the prep table for support. Heat still pulsed under her skin from the bond strike, but the dizziness ebbed enough that she could think in fragments. "He is waiting. He is not touching me." He asked. He stopped. The facts repeated like counting beads in shaking hands. The kitchen door opened a crack, and Marta peered in with fierce, anxious eyes. Jasper rose in one controlled movement and turned just enough to include her without breaking line of sight with Celeste. "Marta, stay with her," he said. "I want broth, water, and the East servants' chamber warmed now. Send for healer Isra, but Celeste chooses whether she enters." His tone hardened. "No council member, no candidate, no guard beyond that threshold unless I place them." Marta gave a sharp nod. "Understood, my king." Jasper looked back at Celeste. "You will not be questioned tonight. Not by court, not by law, not by me. You need rest." "I need to keep working," she said, then hated how automatic it sounded. "You need to stay alive." A brief pause. "And so does your child." He stepped backward, making room instead of claiming it, then left the kitchen with his wolf's tension still radiating through stone. By the time the midnight bell finished its last low note, Celeste lay in the East servants' chamber wrapped in clean blankets, staring at ceiling beams darkened by old smoke. The room was small but warm, tucked near the bakery ovens, with one narrow window and a door Marta had barred from the inside. Healer Isra had come, gray-haired and steady-handed, and waited in the doorway until Celeste nodded permission. The examination was quick, respectful, and ordinary in the best possible way. Pulse, breath. Belly listened through palm and ear. No prying questions about scandal, no pity sharpened into gossip. Stable, Isra had said. Exhausted but stable, yet sleep would not hold. Every time she drifted, memory surged back jagged and bright. The necklace stone, Wulfric's voice, the scrape of quill on false testimony. Near the deepest part of night, she woke choking on a cry she could not swallow. Her hands flew to her abdomen. Stillness met her palms. No movement. The room tilted. Panic took command so quickly she could not pace her breath around it. "Move, little heart. Please move. I am here. I am here. Not again. Not silence. Not this." Breathe in. No, it catches. Do it again. "If I wake the room, they will think I am unstable," like he wrote. "If I stay quiet and something is wrong, I lose everything. I cannot choose the wrong second. I cannot fail you now. I have crossed mountains and lied to my own pain to keep you safe. So move. Please move." I am not asking for miracles. Only one kick, one sign, one answer that my body has not betrayed us both. She slid from the mattress to the cold flagstone because standing felt impossible under the pressure in her chest. A firm knock landed once against the wood, and Marta's voice came through, tight and low. "Emergency latch, my lady?" The East servants' chamber bar had a steward's override for fire or healer calls. Metal caught, then lifted from the corridor side with a rough scrape. She did not hear footsteps in the corridor, only a familiar scent and the soft close of wood. Jasper knelt 2 arm lengths away. No guards, no witness, dark hair loose from whatever meeting he had abandoned. He wore only a simple black tunic and boots, as if he had come from his own chambers in haste. "Celeste," he said, voice low, careful. "Marta heard you cry out. May I come closer?" She nodded, shaking hard enough her teeth clicked. "I cannot feel the baby," she whispered. "I woke and there was nothing. I cannot feel—" "You are breathing too fast for your body to read anything else." He placed one hand on his own sternum, demonstrating. Match me. In through the nose. Hold 2 counts. Out slowly. She tried and failed. He waited. Tried again with her. Counted for her. Again. Again. The panic did not vanish, but it loosened by degrees, like a knot worked patiently rather than cut. "May I put my hand on your belly?" he asked when her breaths lengthened. "Or do you want to do it and I guide from here?" The question hit her with a fresh wave of disorientation. No alpha she had known asked permission for anything. She caught her lower lip between her teeth, then took his wrist and placed his palm where fear had made her press too hard. Warmth spread through fabric and skin. Not magic this time, not a violent bond strike, just solid heat and steady pressure. Jasper bowed his head, listening with the concentration of a warrior mapping terrain in darkness. Seconds stretched. Celeste's pulse thundered so loudly she nearly missed it when it came, a strong, indignant kick against his hand. She gasped, then laughed once on a broken sob. Jasper's eyes closed for a heartbeat, relief carving years from his face. "There you are," he murmured to the child, then looked at her. "Again. Keep breathing." Another flutter, softer, then a roll. Celeste pressed both hands over his, tears sliding unchecked now that fear had cracked open. "I thought I lost." "You did not." His voice roughened. "You did not." Silence settled, fragile and sacred. He did not move to embrace her. He did not call her mate like a claim stamped in iron. He simply remained kneeling on cold stone until her breathing evened and the trembling in her shoulders eased. When she finally leaned back, he withdrew his hand at once. From the chair by the wall, he lifted a heavy wolf fur cloak lined with heated stitching stones, clearly his, and held it out. "This will keep your core temperature steady through the rest of night," he said. "Take it. I cannot wear the king's cloak. You can when the king tells you to." A faint spark of humor touched her despite swollen eyes. That sounded like a command. It was a request wearing command clothes. The answer was dry enough that a startled huff escaped her, half laugh, half disbelief. He waited until she wrapped the cloak around her shoulders, then stood and offered his forearm, not her hand, giving her choice in how to rise. She accepted. Minutes later, he was in the servants' hearth, sleeves rolled, stirring broth himself while Marta watched with narrowed suspicion that might have been respect wearing practical disguise. He ladled Celeste's bowl first, set bread beside it, and sat only after she had eaten several spoonfuls. When she slowed, he did not urge. He finished his own bowl after hers was empty, as if some private rule required that order. Dawn came pale and hard over the eastern ridge. 3 days passed before the next public meal, and in that span the keep became a hive of rumor constrained by fear of royal reprisal. Celeste worked lighter duties under Marta's eye, carried no heavy iron, and slept in the east chamber where the door stayed barred at night from the inside. Jasper did not hover. He appeared at intervals that felt intentional rather than possessive, checking in with few words and exact attention, then returning to council storms she sensed more than saw. At the evening meal on the 4th day, the great hall blazed with torchlight and polished brass. Snowmelt dripped from cloaks near the doors, and the long table smelled of roasted roots, venison, butter, and sharp wine. Celeste had not wanted to enter that room at all. Marta had squeezed her shoulder once and said, "If he summons, you walk in standing tall," and had tied Celeste's borrowed gray dress with a clean sash that sat just beneath the curve of her belly. Conversation thinned the moment she crossed the threshold. Whispers rose in pockets, soft enough to deny, clear enough to wound. Liar, discarded mate, kitchen girl with a crown appetite. She kept her gaze forward and moved toward the rear servant station, cheeks burning. At the high table, Jasper sat flanked by council elders and 2 unchosen Luna candidates who wore their smiles like knives wrapped in silk. His eyes found Celeste at once. The hall held its breath. Elder Corvin leaned toward the king and said, not quietly enough, "If she serves, let her serve. Seating her near governance invites mockery." A second voice, Lady Mirren, added with bright cruelty, "Or perhaps this is how Duskwalker chooses queens now, by dropped kettles and dramatic fainting." Celeste stopped walking. Old reflex told her to make herself smaller, to absorb impact and survive it later in private. Jasper stood before that reflex could settle. His chair scraped stone like a blade drawn. "Ancient alpha law," he said, carrying to the far rafters without a shout. "Claws of shielded blood, invoked under crown authority." Gasps rippled through the hall. Corvin stiffened. "Your Majesty, that clause applies only to bonded." "It applies," Jasper cut in, runes igniting gold along his forearms. "When crown-relevant life is threatened by slander, coercion, or unlawful transfer. Challenge me in formal petition if you believe your reading outranks mine." No one answered. His pupils narrowed, the predator surfacing in his gaze, and partial fangs showed when he spoke again. "From this moment, any insult directed at Celeste Windrider is treated as an attack on crown blood and judged accordingly." He descended from the dais, crossed the stone floor, and stopped before her, keeping a respectful span between them despite the eyes on every side. "Celeste," he said, quieter now but still audible, "sit beside me." The invitation carried no forced compulsion. She could refuse. That choice mattered so much it hurt. Corvin rose halfway from his bench, face flushed. This is political recklessness. Her legitimacy is unproven, her exile writ unresolved, and the father of that child. Jasper turned his head. "Sit down." Corvin did not. "If Frostborn petitions under inheritance precedent, this hall may be bound to return." A low growl rolled through Jasper's chest, not loud, but absolute. "You will not finish that sentence by threatening her in my hall." Gold brightened through the rune lines until nearby goblets trembled. Several council members looked away first, submitting without being asked. Corvin dropped back to his seat, breath shallow. Jasper faced the room. "Stand." Benches scraped as nobles, officers, and attendants rose in reluctant unison. "Protocol is amended," he said. "Celeste Windrider is served first at every public meal until Moon Court review concludes. She is under royal shield. Violation is treason-adjacent conduct and will be recorded as such." Marta, expression unreadable, stepped forward with a steaming bowl and placed it in Celeste's hands before anyone else received so much as water. The hall watched her, as if waiting for her to break under the weight of attention. Her fingers trembled once against the ceramic, then steadied. Jasper returned to the dais and held the chair beside his own. Only when she reached it on her own feet did he push it in, careful not to touch her back, careful in ways no one else would notice as anything but court polish. She sat, pulse still high, and set the bowl down. For several breaths, neither spoke. Noise resumed in cautious fragments across the hall. Then Jasper said without looking at her, "You are safe here tonight." The simple certainty in his voice sliced through layers of defended disbelief she had worn like armor. Safety still felt foreign, conditional, dangerous to trust. Yet as servants moved, as no one dared repeat the earlier whispers above a murmur, as the king beside her chose restraint and ferocity in exactly the right order, a wall she had not known she built began quietly to crumble. The crack in that wall frightened her almost as much as the wall itself. Trust had always come with invoices in her old life, each kindness itemized later as debt, each shelter revealed as a cage with softer blankets. Celeste stared at the steam rising from her bowl and forced her spoon to her mouth, while her pulse steadied by slow increments. Around them, nobles resumed conversation in carefully lowered voices, the kind that pretended civility while sharpening new weapons under the table. She felt it before she saw it, a shift in attention near the western doors where two sentries straightened in unison. Then the doors opened to a courier wrapped in wind-darkened wool, crest pin iced over from the climb. He crossed the hall at a pace too controlled for routine and dropped to one knee at the base of the dais. "Message from the outer gate," he said, breath clouding in the torchlight. "Truce banner raised from Frostborn territory. Alpha Wulfric requests immediate audience under Moon Treaty and claims private legal petition regarding one Celeste Windrider." The spoon slipped from Celeste's fingers and struck porcelain with a thin, betraying sound. Every conversation died. Jasper did not look at the courier first. He looked at Celeste. In the stillness between them, she saw the exact instant his protective instinct collided with royal duty. His jaw tightened. His hand settled beside his goblet, not touching it, knuckles pale with restraint. "State his declared purpose," Jasper said. The courier swallowed. His words were, "I have come to retrieve my pregnant mate and prevent unlawful harboring of my heir." A cold pressure closed around Celeste's ribs. Not surprise. Not even fear in its first form. Recognition. Wulfric never left outcomes to chance. If he had crossed a border under treaty protection, he had already bribed half the road behind him and scripted the speech for everyone he intended to corner. Elder Corvin rose again, emboldened by procedure now that a legal framework stood between him and the king's temper. "Under truce law, Your Majesty, refusal of audience can be interpreted as admission of wrongful custody." Marta was 2 tables down, frozen with a serving tray in her hands, eyes locked on Celeste with naked worry. The kitchen boys near the side wall, Tomas and Pell and little Bryn with flour still on his sleeve, had gone silent as stone. Jasper stood. "Wulfric Frostborn will be received in the lower petition chamber, not this hall. No weapons beyond ceremonial sidearms, full witness record. He speaks once. Then she speaks." His gaze cut to Corvin. "Anyone who interrupts her testimony loses counsel voice for the hearing." He turned to Celeste and lowered his tone, though everyone strained to hear. "You can decline attendance and submit written statement instead." Wulfric, controlling the room while she hid behind parchment, flashed through her like old poison. She set her spoon down with deliberate care, rose on unsteady legs, and lifted her chin. "I will attend." Jasper's eyes held hers for one beat, assessing, then accepting. "Then we go now." By dawn of the next morning, the entire keep knew the truce meeting had stretched past midnight and resumed with first light, and rumor had thickened into factions before bread reached the ovens. Celeste stood at the petition chamber threshold wrapped in Jasper's wolf fur cloak over a plain gray dress, one hand braced at the underside of her belly where the child pressed and rolled as if reacting to her tension. The chamber itself smelled of old stone, ink, and cold iron. Scribes lined the right wall. Council elders sat in a crescent. At the center table waited a lacquered case she recognized before she reached her chair. The necklace, black stone veined red, blood charm filigree, Wulfric's chosen instrument for manufacturing instability. He rose when she entered. Every line of him immaculate, silver-threaded coat fastened at the throat, dark hair tied back with formal precision. He had always favored this version of himself when he wanted to look reasonable while committing harm. His expression arranged itself into practiced concern, as if he were a patient husband collecting a wayward wife from unfortunate influences. "Celeste," he said softly, loud enough to carry. "You look unwell." "I came as soon as I heard." Her skin went cold. "You came because your forgery failed." A flicker crossed his mouth and vanished. He bowed to Jasper with polished deference that never reached his eyes. "Your Majesty, I regret the disruption. My mate has suffered episodes since late term began. She becomes fearful, confused, vulnerable to suggestion. I bring sworn witnesses and sent verification so this can be resolved with dignity." He gestured, and two scent keepers stepped forward wearing Frostborn insignia beneath travel cloaks. Celeste recognized one immediately, Darren, who had taken coin to sign her exile affidavit without meeting her gaze. The second she did not know, but his expression had the same brittle confidence of a man repeating purchased lines. Wulfric placed 3 scrolls on the table and untied the first ribbon. Witness statements attesting that Celeste admitted infidelity with an unknown outsider during my stewardship cycle. Additional record that her current panic episodes predate exile and include delusional accusations of financial misconduct. The words landed like stones thrown from a distance, meant less to wound her directly than to shape the room around her. Council eyes shifted. Quills moved. Corvin leaned forward, hunger thinly disguised as concern. Celeste's nails bit into her palm under the table until pain steadied her. She could hear Jasper's breathing to her left, quiet and measured, but the force beneath it prickled across her skin like distant thunder. Wulfric opened the lacquered case and lifted the necklace between 2 fingers. I also retained her stabilization charm, keyed by lawful bond scar. If she wears it, this hearing can proceed without distress. Jasper's voice cut through the chamber like drawn steel. Set that down. Wulfric did not. With respect, Your Majesty, refusal of treatment may further prove incapacity. Set it down, Jasper repeated. And this time, amber brightened in his irises, ancient authority rising close to the surface. Wulfric smiled faintly and obeyed, letting the charm rest on velvet. The hearing moved into testimony. Darren spoke first, swearing he had observed Celeste in romantically compromised proximity with an outsider no one could name. The second scent keeper claimed her scent profile indicated deception patterns and emotional volatility. Each sentence was crafted to sound technical, neutral, inevitable. Celeste listened and felt old helplessness claw up from places she had sealed. This was how reputations died, not with dramatic accusations but with bureaucratic language stacked into a wall no one bothered to climb. When Jasper signaled her turn, she stood slowly, palms damp, throat tight. The chamber blurred at the edges for one dangerous moment. Speak clearly. One fact at a time. Do not rush. He built this trap for panic. Refuse him that gift. You crossed a mountain in sleet to keep this child beyond his reach. You are allowed to occupy your own voice. You are allowed to be believed. I was never unfaithful, she said. No outsider existed. The claim was drafted after I copied ledgers showing missing winter medicine funds redirected to Alpha Wulfric's private war chest. The night I confronted him, he burned those copies and threatened custody seizure after birth under inheritance law. The necklace is not stabilization. It is a pain trigger keyed to my old scar, meant to induce symptoms in public and support his claim that I am unfit. Corvin interjected despite Jasper's warning. Can you prove the financial allegation without the burned copies? Before Celeste could answer, Jasper spoke without raising his voice. Elder Corvin, you are now silent for the remainder of this hearing. Corvin sputtered. Jasper did not look at him. Wulfric spread his hands, posture almost sorrowful. This is what I feared. Persecution narratives, paranoia, accusations against lawful authority. I did not come to punish her. I came to retrieve her before this environment reinforces delusion. The room wavered again as rage and dread collided in Celeste's bloodstream. She turned toward him fully. You struck me in your office while a healer documented my reaction as instability. His expression stayed composed. I restrained you when you became violent. You threatened to remove my child. I promised legal protection. You forged exile. I enacted disciplinary law. The exchange tightened, word against word, his serenity weaponized, her truth forced to prove itself against his practiced mask. Jasper's restraint was becoming physically visible now, shoulders rigid, fingers curled once against the arm of his chair. Still, he let the process run, because kings who broke procedure handed adversaries new blades. 3 days passed after that first hearing before the second convened, and in those days pressure seeped into every corridor of Duskwalker Keep. Courtiers stopped speaking when Celeste entered. 2 maids refused to share washroom space with her. Anonymous notes appeared on the kitchen board warning that war would come if she stayed. Jasper increased guards near the nursery wing and the east servants' corridor, but he did it quietly, avoiding spectacle that could be framed as unlawful detention. At night, he sat with her in the library alcove for short spans between council sessions, reading old trial statutes while she mended torn aprons she did not need to mend, both of them pretending that legal language could neutralize malice this organized. One evening, while sleet whispered against stained glass and hearthlight drew copper along the edges of his profile, Jasper closed a statute book and looked at her with unguarded intensity. "I can force this now," he said. "I can reject treaty formalities, place him in irons, and dare any pack to contest my authority." "You could," she answered. "It would trigger at least 3 border challenges by spring. And they would call it proof that I turned you reckless." His mouth tightened. "I do not care what they call me. I do." She set her mending aside and met his gaze. "Because I will not survive this by becoming the excuse for everyone else's ambition." He exhaled, long and controlled, then nodded once. "Then we win it clean." The tenderness in that promise hurt in its own way, because she believed him, and believing made the stakes larger. On the morning of the second hearing, she went to the kitchens early for tea she could keep down, and found Tomas, Pell, and Bryn huddled by the flour bins trading whispered guesses about wolves and treaties. Tomas, all elbows and earnestness at 12, handed her a warm roll he had hidden in his apron. Pell tried to look grown while asking if kings ever smiled without frightening people. Bryn, missing his front tooth, pressed both palms to her belly and announced that the baby kicked hardest when she sang to the bread ovens. Celeste laughed despite herself and promised to bring them sugared apples after the hearing. By sunset, all 3 were gone. It happened during the evening shift change, precise enough to feel rehearsed. A supply cart arrived at the lower service gate with proper seals and one forged delivery order bearing Marta's mark copied in careful imitation. 2 men in porter coats collected extra hands for cellar inventory. Tomas went first, proud to be chosen. Pell followed after grumbling. Bryn ran to catch up because he hated being left out. The cart rolled out before anyone questioned why cellar inventory required crossing the outer yard. The first alarm came from Marta, white-faced and shaking, clutching the forged order. The second came from a gate scout who found the real porters bound, but unharmed in a ravine shed. Night fell hard over the keep, while search parties fanned across lower trails. Jasper sealed the gates and dispatched trackers. Celeste stood in the war room doorway with ice in her veins, hearing every report as if through water. No scent trail on the north spur. False tracks toward the western ridge. One torn strip of porter coat near the treaty marker stones. Then the final message arrived, carried by a truce runner who refused to meet her eyes. He handed Jasper a waxed packet and backed away. Jasper read it once, jaw turning to granite, then passed it to Celeste. The note was in Wulfric's hand. 3 kitchen boys for 1 unstable female. Cross Frostborn border alone by moonrise tomorrow, and they return untouched. Bring no king, no guard, no trackers. If Duskwalker violates truce line, inheritance claim is filed at once, and boys are moved beyond mountain jurisdiction. A smaller line at the bottom, almost elegant in its cruelty. Choose, Celeste. Law or children. The room went silent except for the wind hitting the shutters like distant drums. Jasper stepped toward her, then stopped when she did not move, giving her space even now, even here. Critical decisions had a sound, she realized. Not dramatic. Not loud. just the quiet click of old fear locking against new resolve. She folded the note with careful hands and looked up, the ember inside her no longer shaking. "Call Moon Court witnesses," she said. "If he wants law, I will meet him in law where everyone can see." Jasper did not argue. The absence of argument was its own form of trust, and it landed in Celeste's chest with almost painful weight. He took the folded note from her hand, passed it to Captain Elian for record seal, then faced the council ring gathering at the war room threshold. "By Moon statute, emergency session," he said. "Summon neutral witnesses from both treaty houses. Prepare the Southern Stone Circle for trial of the moon at first clear moonrise. Full public record. No closed chambers." Corvin started, outrage and fear mixing in equal measure. That right has not been invoked in 2 generations. It places crown blood in uncontrolled. Jasper turned his head only slightly. "Then you should have defended it when it protected women you did not care about." Celeste stepped forward before debate could widen. "Send a runner to Frostborn camp. Tell Wulfric I accept legal confrontation under moon law, and the hearing will occur in open circle, not private exchange. If he refuses, his custody petition collapses under cowardice clause." Several elders blanched at the clause named aloud, but none contradicted it. Scribes began writing at once. Marta appeared in the doorway, flower still on her sleeves, face set like carved oak. "I want it entered that Thomas, Pell, and Bryn are under Duskwalker hearth protection and will return to fortress status the second they cross back." Celeste looked at her and nodded. "Enter it." The room moved around them with disciplined urgency. Messengers ran. Wax seals stamped. Witness bells rang from the eastern tower. Through it all, Jasper stayed at Celeste's shoulder without touching her, a steady line of heat and attention she could lean toward without surrendering herself. By the time the moon rose clear above the southern ridge, the stone circle blazed with torchlight and law fire. The circle stood just inside neutral boundary, 12 ancient pillars carved with weathered runes, snowmelt running in thin silver threads through their grooves. Duskwalker guards held the outer ring. Frostborn representatives waited opposite under truce pennants. Neutral recorders from the 2 treaty houses sat at ink tables between them, hands poised. No one could claim secrecy tonight. Wulfric arrived with theatrical precision, cloak unmarked by travel despite the muddy climb, his legal chest carried by 2 attendants, and the 3 children behind him under escort. Celeste's breath caught when she saw Tomas, Pell, and Bryn standing upright, wrapped in spare cloaks, frightened but visibly unharmed. Marta made a sound between sob and prayer behind her. "Children to neutral table," Celeste said immediately. Wulfric lifted a hand. "Terms were solitary crossing." "Terms changed when I invoked trial," she replied. "You accepted by appearing. They stand under witness protection now. Move them." For one thin second he considered refusing. Then he smiled that careful smile and gestured. The boys were guided to the neutral ward line, where treaty matrons took custody. Bryn spotted Celeste and raised a shaking hand. She returned it once, then forced herself to look away so she would not break focus. The Herald of Moonlaw stepped into the center and struck a bronze staff against stone 3 times. Accusation and counter-accusation are now bound to truth combat and witness revelation. False testimony under moonfire carries permanent oathmark. "Who invokes?" "I do," Celeste said, voice carrying farther than she expected. "Celeste Windrider, carrying future pack blood, accused of infidelity, instability, and unlawful concealment." "And what remedy do you seek?" "Public truth, nullification of forged writs, release of all coercive claims over me and my child, and judgment for mate coercion, child endangerment, and treason through fund theft and document fraud." Murmurs broke across both factions. Wulfric spread his hands, all wounded dignity. "See how she performs. She memorizes legal phrases and calls it truth. Your Majesty, Even now you can end this with compassion. Return her to my care. I will withdraw charges and avoid war for your sake." Jasper did not step into the circle. His restraint was iron. "Speak to the law, not to me." Wulfric's gaze slid back to Celeste. "Then law first. Produce evidence that is not your own frightened imagination." She reached into her cloak and drew out the necklace from the lacquered case Jasper had insisted be entered as hostile evidence. Red-veined black stone caught moonlight like a clot of shadow. A flicker of surprise crossed Wulfric's face before he masked it. "You kept that. Good. Put it on, and perhaps you will remain coherent long enough to finish a sentence." Celeste walked to the central rune plate where moonfire pooled pale and cold. Every scar memory she carried rose like floodwater, and for one dangerous heartbeat she nearly drowned in it. I am standing in the same kind of ring where men once decided my life with ink and smirks. My hands remember shaking. My mouth remembers silence. The old training says lower your gaze, survive this hour, pay later in private. Not tonight. Not with 3 children watching from the ward line and a future daughter or son listening through my blood. I am afraid, and fear is real, but fear is not command. He taught me to confuse obedience with safety. He taught everyone else to call coercion order. I do not need to be fearless to end this. I need one clear choice after another. Speak, hold ground, use what he built to expose him. If my voice cracks, I speak anyway. If my knees shake, I remain upright. He does not get to write me again. She knelt and pressed the necklace directly to the moonfire rune. The charm screamed. Not with sound in the air, but with a psychic pressure that hit every bonded wolf in the circle at once. Red light burst through the stone's veins, then fractured into silver as moonfire rejected blood tampering. Above the rune plate, images spilled outward in living projection, jagged at first, then sharp as polished glass. Wulfric in his office burning copied ledgers. Wulfric striking Celeste and dictating false testimony while a healer wrote. Darren taking a heavy coin pouch and signing affidavit lines he had not witnessed. Counselor Brevin rehearsing exile language from a script in Wulfric's hand. The necklace being keyed to her scar while Wulfric said, "Trigger it during public hearing and she will look unfit before she speaks." Gasps rippled through both crowds. One frostborn witness retched into the snow. Corvin, from the Duskwalker line, sat down hard on a stone bench and stopped pretending uncertainty. Wulfric's mask finally cracked. "Cheap illusion," he snapped. "Moonfire can be manipulated." A treaty recorder stood, voice shaking but clear. "Projection carries blood signature concordance. Verified. We are recording." Darren tried to back away and collided with a pillar. "My lord, I did not know she would—" "Silence," Wulfric hissed. He moved then, sudden and vicious, abandoning procedure because procedure had failed him. His form blurred into wolf shift, dark fur breaking through formal cloth, shoulders widening, jaw lengthening, the man stripped down to rage and possession. He lunged across the inner ring toward Celeste. Jasper stepped forward the same instant, blocked by Law Ward Flare at the circle edge. Trial boundaries held him back by the very rules Celeste had chosen. His growl shook the torches, but he did not break the right and invalidate her claim. Celeste did not run. She shifted. It came like moonlight turning solid beneath her skin, silver-white fur racing over her limbs, spine lengthening, senses igniting with crystalline precision. Her changed body was leaner than Wulfric's brute mass, luminous against the dark stones, unmistakably rare. A collective cry tore through the onlookers. Even neutral scribes forgot their quills for a breath. She met Wulfric head-on, not to destroy, but to redirect, shoulder to chest, claw to leverage point. She twisted with tactical economy learned from years of avoiding stronger bodies, used his speed against him, and drove him sideways into the basalt lip of the rune plate. Stone cracked, His foreleg hit wrong with a sharp final snap that ended his momentum without gore, without spectacle, only consequence. He yelped, staggered, tried to recover, and she was already over him, weight angled, throat pinned by the strength she had been told all her life she did not possess. "Run!" Jasper shouted to the ward matrons. They did, guiding Thomas, Pell, and Bryn behind the Duskwalker guard wall and out of the immediate ring. Celeste shifted back on shaking legs, seized the moon-forged blade from the judgment stand, and set its edge at Wulfric's throat as he returned to human form, breath ragged, one arm braced against the ground. Snow hissed where moonfire ash fell around them. "Stay down," she said. He laughed, broken and furious. "You think this makes you sovereign? You were mine before he scented you." The sentence landed exactly where he intended, on old scars. It did not reopen them. "I was never yours," Celeste said, voice steady as drawn wire. "Only trapped." The herald stepped to the ring edge. State requested sentence under trial authority. Celeste kept the blade level. "For mate coercion, child endangerment through hostage exchange, theft of sacred pack funds, and falsified exile process, I request full stripping of rank, permanent cross-pack banishment, and oathbreaker mark recognized by all treaty houses." Wulfric spat blood and snow to the side and glared at Jasper. "You let a servant pass sentence while she carries uncertain blood. This will fracture every alliance you own." Jasper entered the circle only after the herald lowered the trial ward in acknowledgement that Celeste had won standing dominance. He came to her side, not in front, one hand near, but not on her shoulder. "Alliance built on coercion deserves fracture," he said. He looked to the recorders. "Enter final royal judgment. By crown and moon, Wulfric Frostborn is stripped of alpha rank, stripped of inheritance petition rights, exiled beyond all pack borders, and marked Oathbreaker forever." The moon-forged marking blade changed hands. Jasper carved the banishment rune over Wulfric's sternum in one swift, controlled stroke, enough to seal magic and identity without cruelty. The mark flared ember red, then blackened into permanent scar sigil. Frostborn witnesses recoiled. Neutral matrons nodded grimly. Law had spoken where manipulation once ruled. Wulfric tried to rise, failed when his injured leg buckled, and crawled to the circle edge under the eyes of both packs, stripped not by rumor but by record. No one moved to help him until the herald signaled he could be removed. Even then, his own attendants hesitated before lifting him. The stone circle held a stunned quiet after he was taken beyond torchlight, as if everyone present understood they had watched an old paradigm break in real time. Then Tomas's voice called from the guard line, small but fierce. "Lady Celeste." She turned. The three boys stood wrapped in Duskwalker cloaks, cheeks wet, very alive. Marta reached them first, pulling all three into her arms at once. Celeste lowered the blade. Her hands began to tremble only then. Jasper faced the gathered witnesses and raised his voice for the record. "All forged claims against Celeste Windrider are annulled, pending Moon Court ratification at dawn. Sanctuary stands. Any retaliation from Frostborn loyalists triggers United Treaty enforcement." He turned back to her. Amber bled with relief and awe, and asked quietly, so only she could hear, "Can you walk?" Celeste inhaled, tasted smoke, snow, and the clean night after storm, and nodded. "Yes." He offered his forearm, the same way he had in her chamber, choice before contact. She took it, and together they stepped out of the circle while both packs watched a truth no one could now pretend not to see. The walk from the stone circle to the moon temple happened under a silence that was not empty, but full of witnesses deciding what they had just seen. Snowmelt ran along the flagstones in thin reflective lines, turning torchlight into trembling ribbons at Celeste's feet. Jasper stayed at her side, close enough for warmth, far enough to honor the space he always offered first. Behind them, Captain Elian directed the guard rotation in clipped orders, and she caught the words, "Neutral, matrons, healer escort, evidence chest secured." The legal chest containing Wulfric's forged scrolls, the lacquered case, and the fractured necklace were sealed with 3 wax marks in plain view before anyone left the circle. Inside the temple's inner sanctum, the heavy doors shut on the noise of the keep. Moonlight spilled through the oculus above, washing carved pillars in pale silver. The chamber smelled of cedar ash and clean stone after rain. A low brazier warmed the center, and Isra waited near it with bandage cloth and a bowl of herb steam, her face lined with relief when she saw Celeste standing on her own legs. "The children are safe in the East Nursery under Marta's watch," Isra said. "Tomas demanded 2 suppers for everyone because, and I quote, 'kidnappers did not feed us enough.' Pell pretended not to cry. Bryn cried enough for all 3 and is now asleep with flour on his cheek." Celeste closed her eyes for one breath, the knot behind her ribs loosening. "Thank you." Isra examined her quickly, efficient and gentle, then looked to Jasper. "No heavy strain tonight. She rests after whatever rite you 2 choose." Her gaze shifted between them, wise and deliberately neutral. "I will wait outside the door. Knock once if you need me." When the healer left, the sanctum became still again. Jasper removed his gauntlets, set his sword belt on the altar rail, and turned to Celeste with no throne room distance left in him, only a man carrying awe and restraint in equal measure. "The trial is won," he said softly. "The mark can wait until dawn, or a month, or never, if that is your choice. I will not bind you through shock." She studied him, really studied him, the roughness in his breathing, the faint tremor in his hand, now that command was no longer holding him upright. "Do you want it now?" "I have wanted you safe more than I have wanted anything." His mouth tightened with honest fear. "I want this, Celeste. I want you. But want is not consent." The words went through her like heat, through winter-numb fingers. She stepped closer until she could feel his breath at her temple and took his hand, placing it against her pulse. "No more hiding," she whispered. "Yes. Now." His eyes closed briefly, as if gratitude itself had weight. "Say stop at any point, and I stop." "I know." He lifted both hands slowly, giving her every chance to step back, and cupped her face with reverent care. His forehead touched hers first. Breath shared. A quiet anchor. Then his hand slid to the back of her neck, thumb resting just below her ear, and he kissed the place where neck met shoulder, once, as if asking one final time without words. Celeste tilted her head in answer. His bite landed cleanly at the juncture. Controlled pressure, sharp enough to make her gasp and grip his tunic. Not cruel, not rushed. Pain flared white for a heartbeat, then transformed with startling speed into a molten warmth that spread down her throat, across her chest, and into every place fear had kept clenched. The old panic scent that had shadowed her for months thinned under a new current, steady and bright, like sunlight reaching rooms long kept shuttered. The golden thread between them pulled tight and then opened. Not a tether forcing obedience, but a living channel carrying sensation, trust, relief, hunger for closeness, and the fierce calm of being recognized fully. Jasper made a low sound against her skin, half wonder, half surrender. "Mine," he breathed, then lifted his head at once, searching her face. Too much. She was shaking, but not from fear. Not too much. Her fingers traced the rune lines along his forearm, now lit from within, silver and gold entwining where the marks had once stood separate. "Yours," she said, and saw the words strike him like prayer. He would have knelt then, she realized, if she asked. The Alpha King who had terrified courts was waiting for her next choice with open hands. Celeste slid her palm to his chest over the hard beat of his heart. My turn. He bared the left side of his chest by pulling his tunic collar aside, exposing skin above the heart where old battle scars crossed newer rune work. Here, he said, voice rough. Take what is yours, mate. The word mate settled into her bones like truth finally named. She rose on her toes, braced one hand on his shoulder, and bit him over the heart. She did not strike blindly. She marked with intent, enough force to seal, enough tenderness to honor. He inhaled sharply, arms tightening around her waist as silver gold light burst outward from both their runes in a clean wave that rolled through the sanctum pillars and rang the hanging chimes without wind. The bond snapped into full alignment. She felt his devotion, old loneliness, disciplined rage, and the astonishing gentleness he had hidden from a world that only rewarded steel. He felt her grief, endurance, protective ferocity, and the stubborn ember that had carried her over a mountain when she had every reason to collapse. Mine, he whispered again, this time with tears standing in his eyes he did not hide. Yours, she answered, mate. They said the old anchor together then, foreheads touching, voices unsteady and utterly certain. You are not unchosen. When they finally moved, it was only to sit together on the temple steps before the brazier, Celeste wrapped in his cloak, Jasper's arm around her shoulders, their breathing finding the same slow rhythm. The child kicked, firm and insistent, and both of them laughed softly into the quiet, astonished by joy that asked nothing except to be felt. By dawn, Moon Court convened in the great hall with every bench filled and no whisper left unrecorded. Neutral treaty recorders read the findings aloud. Wulfric's witness scrolls were declared fraudulent. The exile writ against Celeste was voided and entered into the archive as evidence of legal abuse, and the blood-charmed necklace was ordered dismantled under temple supervision, its stone split and rendered inert before the council, so it could never be used again. Darren confessed to accepting bribes and was sentenced to labor restitution under oathmark. Councillor Brevin admitted he drafted the false exile text and lost his seat, his name stricken from voting rolls. Corvin rose, pale and rigid, and offered formal apology for threatening language under shield law. He kept his position only after swearing public compliance to Celeste's authority in sanctuary matters. Lady Mirren requested release from Luna candidacy and departed Duskwalker by noon without further protest. Captain Elian delivered the border report at mid-morning. Wulfric had been escorted beyond the last treaty cairn, the banishment rune verified by 3 territories, and every gate warned. No petition remained pending. Then Jasper stood before crown and pack, drew the moon-silver circlet from the altar cushion, and turned to Celeste where she waited beside Marta, Isra, and the 3 kitchen boys scrubbed clean and clutching each other's sleeves. Celeste Windrider, he said, voice carrying to the rafters, recognized mate by mutual mark, victor under trial of the moon, and defender of crown children not born of her body but protected by her courage. Do you accept the mantle of Luna Queen with independent sanctuary voice equal in law to mine? She looked first at Tomas, Pell, and Bryn. Only if their protection is written, not promised. Marta stepped forward with a fresh parchment. Already drafted. Celeste took the quill and wrote the first line herself. Hearth Oath, binding Duskwalker refuge for abandoned wolves, pregnant exiles, and falsely accused mates, with medical care, open hearing rights, and no forced return without neutral trial. She signed. Jasper signed beneath her. The recorders sealed it. I accept, she said. He placed the circlet on her head, then bowed to her before the pack could bow to either of them. Gasps gave way to a rising chorus of knuckles to chests, wolves and humans alike bending in formal allegiance. Jasper moved to stand at her side, not ahead. Thomas tugged Bryn forward until all 3 boys were directly in front of the dais. We want fortress status with kitchen rotation and schooling, Thomas announced, trying for solemn and nearly succeeding. Celeste smiled through sudden tears. Granted. All three. Marta snorted. And extra chores when you steal rolls. Even Corvin's mouth twitched. Later, in the high courtyard under clear noon light, Celeste rested both hands over her belly as another strong kick answered her touch. Jasper covered her hands with his. Around them, the united pack moved through ordinary tasks that no longer felt fragile. Guards changing watch without faction glare, servants crossing thresholds without flinching, children chasing each other between sunlit stones while Marta pretended not to monitor every step. Peace did not arrive as a miracle. It arrived as law enforced, truth recorded, and love chosen in public, where no one could twist it into shadow again. When the bells rang for first meal, the keep bowed to both of them, and Celeste bowed her head for one private second, feeling the settled bond hum warm and steady beneath her skin, no longer an ember fighting wind, but a hearth that would hold.